See, this is like trying to argue with these motherfuckers. Like,
have you guys heard of Identical Strangers?
Is that like an album by like David Bowie and
I
Bob
would say
Seger?
No.
The Who?
No.
Sounds like a The Who album.
Angela, do you have it?
Am I gonna throw out a classic rock album?
Yes.
Possible?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe it could have been Genesis. I don't know.
Well, all three
That
are
makes
wrong.
sense, kind of.
All three are wrong.
Well,
but Identical Strangers was a
Actually, it's a
book.
Deep Purple album. It
Is
was.
it really?
It actually was.
Is it really?
Yeah. I was checking. I could hear the song in my head. I'm like, what the fuck is it?
Identical Strangers is a book written by Elise Shine when she found out she had an identical twin sister.
Weird.
So she wrote the book Identical Strangers, not to be confused with the beloved American sitcom that ran for 8 seasons from March 25th, 1986 to 1993 on the ABC television network, starring, of course, Mark Lynn Baker and Bronson Pinchot.
Of course,
As
Bronson
Balky.
Pinchot.
As
Balky.
Is that what people say when they say Valky? Is that what
They
they
go,
mean? Valky.
cut
Yeah,
it
Bronson
out. Right? Wasn't that?
Something like
Yeah,
that.
I think anyway.
Pinchot. I like Bronson
So,
Pinchot.
on the wings of a dream.
How do I know that? I've never seen this.
What?
Standing
Something is
tall.
happening here, man.
I have
Something
no
special was happening in this
idea
room.
What's going on?
So,
Wow.
Did we just start a Perfect Strangers?
I think you did.
Identical Strangers is the story of Elise Shine when she met her identical twin sister, Paula Bernstein. But the story that I would like to focus on also has roots in how and why these identical twins are reuniting. So it all takes place July 12th, 1961. A teenage mother gives birth to 4 children. One was stillborn. Of the 3 triplets, they were then adopted by different families.
Whoa,
And
wait
this-
a minute. So this was a natural birth.
This was a natural birth.
She had
Quadruplets.
quadruplets.
She had-
I was like, what is
Yep.
the 4 word?
Quadruple-
in
Yep.
Latin? Like, what's
Quadruplets
In
minus 1.
space, math is
that?
hard.
Yeah.
Space math is terrible.
I want the quadruplets, but can I get them light?
Yeah, sure. Why not? So she gave birth to 3 children
So horrible.
who were all kind of like doled out by this prestigious adoption agency called Louise Wise. So it was Louise, Louise Wise, WISE. And these 3 children were given to an affluent family, a middle-class family, and a blue-collar family.
It's like a Dickens story.
Yeah, definitely. What happened was Bobby, and his name is
Bobby.
Robert?
Robert. Yeah, so Bobby, who is Robert Shafran, he went to college, and the first day he stepped foot on the campus, people started coming up going, "Hey, so good to see you again," kissing him on the cheek, hugging him, and he's like,
Wait, this sounds kind of familiar. What just
Okay.
happened here?
and he starts walking through the dorm, do, and someone knocks on his open door and says, "Oh my God, you're back, Eddie!" And he turns around and looks at his friend, who said immediately, I was like, "You're not Eddie," but it looked just like Eddie. The friend then had Bobby call his friend Eddie and say, "My friend thinks that I look just like you." And on the other end of the line, he heard his own voice going, "Okay." And he goes, "Were you born in New York City?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Were you adopted?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Was your birthday July 12th?" And he goes, "Yes." And he goes,
Stop.
"Which adoption agency?" And he goes, "Hold on. Ma!" And he goes, "It sounded just like me calling back." And he goes, he comes back and says, "Louise Wise." So it makes
Oh, no
international
way.
news.
Wow.
Bobby and Eddie. So Eddie is Bobby is Robert Shafran, and Eddie is Edward Galland, and they immediately make international headlines as these 2 long lost twins.
That's crazy.
Then David Kellman also phones, I think, the Galland family and says, "My friends say that I look just like you," and they all said the hands, because like they're all, like hand on shoulder, photograph in every newspaper. The hands. And when he said he saw it, he was like, oh my God. Raced out, bought another newspaper, saw the same hands, and he's like, those are my hands. Like
they had giant claws. They
really,
had these huge claws.
They were lobsters.
They were big boys. And then he called, and the Galland family's matriarch answered and said, honey, turns around and says, they're coming out of the woodworks. So soon,
Oh my God.
overnight, these triplets found out that they were separated at birth, and this was an international headline story. It made like international papers. They were on the Phil Donahue show.
Yeah.
Like
When you're on Donahue, it's big time.
It's huge.
ABC, you name it. I think CNN, because this was in the 80s at the time, early 80s.
Fake news.
They are overnight sensations, but their family has questions. So they arrange a meeting at the Louise Wise agency offices in Manhattan. I think Manhattan, could be another borough, but they all were told, well, if you get presented with triplets, a lot of households can't take triplets. So we doled them out. Here's the kicker, though. Each of the families, the Galland, the Kelman, and the Shaffron family, all had daughters that they adopted from the Louise Wise agency. So they all had prior Louise Wise agency adoptions.
They're repeat customers?
And now they are each getting a set of triplets, and they didn't know it at the time.
It's like a BOGO.
Oh, whoa.
They're having a BOGO special.
So they were told if, it's really hard to just unload 3 bouncing baby boys to one family. So they had to dole them out, and they're like, that doesn't make any sense because we would have gladly taken them. Again, there was one affluent family, one middle class, and one just blue collar, and they said, well, it doesn't work that way. One father, as he was leaving, said, oh, wait, I forgot my coat or his umbrella, walked back in and saw the Louise Wise agency opening up champagne and pouring themselves champagne flutes.
Oh.
Yeah. I love that part.
So they all smoke the same brand of cigarettes. They all have the same like in women. They all answer at the same time. True. They say true or yes, or they say definitely, absolutely. The same inflection in their voice. When Phil Donahue turned around and said, look, they're even all sitting in the exact same... Yeah. At the same time, they all crossed right over left legs. And the audience was like, what? So... The documentary that I watched that CNN, go ahead and say it.
Fake news.
Produced is called Three Identical Strangers. It came out in 2018. It's directed by Tim Wardle and, again, stars Edward Galland, David Kelman, and Robert Shaffron, these 3 triplets. One of the most telling areas of the research is that this was intentional. This was the Jewish Board of Guardians.
It's a hard J.
What?
That's the most amazing reaction ever. Jewish? Whoa.
So the...
I was going to ask, like, were they all Jewish? Like, from, like, the Louise Wise...
Yeah, that's a good question. So Louise Wise is a very prestigious Jewish family adoption center.
Like, I was going to say all their last names
I never thought about there being a
Jewish.
Jewish-centric adoption center.
But it makes
sense.
Makes
a lot of sense,
yeah.
They were all doled out, by the Jewish Board of Guardians under the direction of a Dr. Peter B. Neubauer, who specializes in mental illness. Now, Elise Schein and Paula Bernstein... They found out during the making of this documentary that their mother had schizophrenia. When they went back and reviewed the triplets' biological mother, she had a lot of addiction problems.
Okay.
Unfortunately, one of the brothers, Eddie Galland, commits suicide. He was kind of bipolar. The understanding is that Dr. Neubauer they were trying to document how each child was being upraised to document nature versus nurture.
Right.
Oh, nice.
Because they have a lot of things in common, but again, they all met each other at the age of 19. They were full-ass grown adults, and they had a lot of differences. And it is an absolutely compelling documentary, but it doesn't end on a good note. But there are arguments for both nature and nurture in this, which I think is weird.
sorry if you mentioned this. Which family did Eddie grow up in?
Eddie grew
What was
up.
his background?
He was the middle class family with a disciplinarian father,
Okay.
and he had mental health issues. The craziest thing is that they were all documented and filmed at various points in their life. They all lived within 100 miles radius of one another, and they
That's
were filmed doing
crazy.
tests for like aptitude tests and like things like that.
Wow.
But
And
the tests were actually part of the experiment. They didn't. The experiment continued throughout their lives. They didn't
Yep.
know it. They're still coming back, checking on them, and they'd act like, "Oh, this is for your school or something like that." No, it was from them
So
testing.
even
them.
their parents didn't even know that
Didn't
that's
even know.
what they're
Yeah.
doing.
There are
Creepy.
still.
Am I-
It's creepy as hell.
Am I alone in thinking that that's just badass? It's not. It is. It is creepy, but it's also like a really good science experiment, right? Like if you would have, someone probably had that idea, but they're like, "Nah, dude, we can't like separate a bunch of triplets and twins from."
That would be the only
Like,
way to
hold
do
on,
it.
hold
You would
my,
have to do it secretly like that.
Right,
yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's that's
hold my
tainted.
mochaccino, fam, and then you like split up this entire
Yep.
family of people, and then like monitor them their whole lives.
It's
cool.
draconian
It's terrible.
and terrible. Yeah,
It's cool, but draconian.
This
But
is
cool.
this is really weird.
Learn
though.
some stuff.
There's probably 6 to 8 other sets of twins or triplets in the United States born between 1960 and 1980 that don't know they have someone else out there that looks just like them. So the documentary ends with, imagine walking down a street in New York City and turning the corner and it just goes black. And you're face to face with an Angela. I'm just
Well,
saying,
she's used to that.
Happens
This
to
is-
me all the
That
time.
happened to her. Just happened to her like 5 minutes ago.
this is mistaken identity.